We'd like to thank you for joining us for another episode of Looking to Jesus. As usual, my name is John Hines. I'm the preacher for the Church of Christ in North Ridgeville, Ohio, which is right on the northern edge of the state, within about 10 or 15 minutes of Lake Erie. I am joined by
Daniel Sanders.
Daniel Sanders preaches in
Norwalk, Ohio. About 3 hours north of Cincinnati. Actually, we
should probably stop laughing about that for anyone who hasn't listened to all the previous episodes and why do they always joke around in the first?
I don't know. Yeah,
2 minutes.
I'm located about 10 minutes south of Lake Erie, about halfway, 50 minutes west of Cleveland, and 50 minutes west of Toledo, located up near Cedar Point Amusement Park.
You get a lot of visitors
we do
coming through the
summer.
area who are coming up to the park for the weekend.
We're going to slow down here. We got about another month, so we'll be losing some of those visitors that we get from Cedar Point coming for vacations and different things.
Yeah. How are you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing all right. Doing all right today. Kind of had a rough week of sleep, but...
Oh. I'm doing well as well.
Good.
Well, too. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. I didn't get a chance. You kept on interrupting me, but anyway. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm rambunctious as ever.
You walked in all chipper today here in the office, so...
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we finished up last week. We were looking at our study for the last few weeks has been different ways that God's people are described, different names. And we concluded that last week by talking about how we're called Christians. They're from Acts chapter 11. So we're moving on. This week, what are we talking about?
So we kind of figured we could look at, after we finish that series on Christians and the different names of Christians, the people of God, I figured we could look at the church. You know, Jesus said in Matthew 16, verse 18, upon this rock I'm going to build my church. And as we've talked about the people of the church, now we want to talk about some of our work as a church, and talking about the local church as described in the scriptures, being able to look, each individual church has its own identity, Church of Christ here at Norwalk, for you, Church of Christ North Ridgeville. And we want to look at Jesus building his church and being able to understand the work or the role of the church here in our time today, and exactly what is the role of the church. And I think we can break it up into 5 points in looking at some of the different things here this morning, and want to be able to take some time in understanding that. And I think with our next lesson, I'm going to jump ahead and kind of prepare everybody. We're going to talk, I think, from looking at the role of the church, talking about my role in the church next week, and then kind of looking at one of those roles in a couple of weeks and how we're to handle such things when it comes to discipline.
Okay, so this week we're talking about the role of the church or the work of the church.
Yeah, going to look in a general sense, yeah.
I guess one of my questions would be, what do you think people are looking for in the world? What do you think most people are looking for?
Well, there are those people that are looking for a church to be able to worship. Unfortunately, when we look at things, the normality of things is, I want entertainment.
Yeah. And I was thinking about it on the way over here. I do, sometimes we paint with a pessimistic brush, and we think, well, people are just looking for entertainment.
Right.
And I'm not sure that's not,
I don't think that's accurate.
I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. Right. That I do think people want to be built up.
They want to have that build up, but there's also that other side of, I want something else with it.
Yeah. I'm not sure they really realize scripturally what builds us up.
Right.
And that's why they get into the entertainment side,
right?
Because it is enjoyable for them, and they think that that's how we are encouraged, and that's how our faith is built up.
I think it's sometimes when we look at it compared to how the banks used to try to get your business. We're going to offer.
I want a free toaster.
Exactly.
I want a free toaster.
I want a free toaster. I want my little handheld appliance, or be able to plug in appliance that you're going to offer. I want my blender. I want my toaster. I want my radio. How people try to be able, I want a bank. I need a bank. I need to be able to have an account. I need to have these different things. yes, that's true, to be able to sustain in our society for the most part. But what else can you give me besides the things I need? I want something.
The place
else.
I preached at before here over in Indiana, there was we lived down the road from a community church.
Yeah.
And they were known for having, I don't think they refer to them as this, but they would give visitors gift bags. And, it had like a mug and it had something else and little treats and this and that. Well, I started calling them swag bags. Like
pretty much.
You go to, you always hear about at award shows and all the actors or actresses, they all get swag bags. And that's what they were doing. It's like freebies, handouts. And I would just always think, man, can you imagine Jesus and the apostles? Okay, can you imagine the apostles in Acts chapter 2? And it's like, okay, you're fresh from the waters of baptism. Here's your swag bag. Thanks for coming.
Right.
And it's just preposterous. But
that's what some people. People want to hear something, but they want something extra for. Well, I'm giving my time to you for coming to church. What else can you give me?
Yeah.
And so we're mindful of those things and just careful about, are we overstepping our role as a church? Some people, what can you offer? Are you going to offer me a meal? I mean,
right.
if you want to go out to eat with me, yeah, but is it the role of the church to be able to not only feed you spiritually, but physically?
I do like food.
I do like food too.
People liked food in John 6 when they were following him just for the food.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have the gymnasium where we can have activities? Do you have the softball team? I need to be on the softball. By the way, we have a pretty good softball field out here outside next to the church building where the kids.
It is not a part of the a part of the church building. But yeah, some people are looking for that.
Yeah.
For that sort of stuff. But a lot of folks are looking to be encouraged and edified, and a lot of folks want to worship. They just get caught up in man's definitions of, okay, well, what is worship? How should we worship?
Yeah.
How should the church operate? What is the church's function? What actually does build us up?
Yeah, and we've had visitors before where people, I say, well, I'm coming from this, and they offer this, and this, and it's completely different of what is offered or what we do. We don't have the swag bag, or we don't have the different things. Do we want to have time to spend with one another? Absolutely we do. We can be able to do different things together. We can be able to hang out together, but also we see there are some defining points of what the church that Jesus built is to focus on. We see in Acts 2 there was that sense of fellowship together, but also there was a sense of fellowship to be the church together. And then outside the quote-unquote assembly area, there was that time they spent together as well.
That word for fellowship, and that word gets thrown around all the time. And people need to go back and look in Scripture to see how that word fellowship is used, what that word actually means, because that word, and not to turn this into you don't have to be a Greek scholar, but you do need to understand what the word originally means and see how it's used, because it is the same word that is translated communion. It is the same word that is translated contribution. It is the same word that is translated distribution. And so it is never used to mean hamburgers, fried chicken, and baseball. That's not what that word means in Scripture. It's not how it's used.
Yeah.
And so if we are going to have fellowship as the Bible describes it, we have to look at how they had fellowship in the New Testament. We have to see how the church operated.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're talking about.
Right. So get into it. First one, I think, when we talk about the role of the church, and we'll just go with what you were mentioning. We were discussing some of the different things. Worship. The church is a focus on worship. Again, we're the church, the members together, as we talk about the disciples or the sheep or Christians, however, whichever word, citizens, all the different words that we have been using, we are that church. And so we get together and we focus on worship. We come together, we worship God. We worship God in spirit and in truth. John 4:23 and 24. Jesus is looking for true worshipers, and those who worship God must worship him in spirit and in truth. So when we come together, whether it's on the first day of the week for our time to worship, or on Wednesday night we worship God, we talk about some of the things. For instance, on the first day of the week, we have specific guidelines of different things we're involved with, whether it's prayer, singing, preaching, teaching. We partake of the Lord's Supper. We see some of the different commands and some of the different things that we do in our worship is designated for the first day of the week. We give on the first day of the week. We partake of communion on the first day of the week, the Lord's Supper on the first day of the week. Then we engage in other parts of our worship together. And the church is to give that time and attention to worship, because it's God who has blessed us. It's God who's taken care of us. And as we look at this, God has provided us all things, and he wants us to come to him, and he wants us to worship him.
And I will say, I've heard people make the not understand a certain aspect of worship. When they come to Jesus, and this is Matthew chapter 22, and they say, what is the great commandment in the law? And he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. We're going to speak here in a minute about edifying one another and building one another up. And the mistake that I've heard people make is they think, and it's somewhat based on a misunderstanding of when Jesus talked about, inasmuch as you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. And they think, oh, well, if I am serving someone else, that is the same thing as worshiping God. It's like, no. The first is love God. The second is love your neighbor. Loving your neighbor is not the equivalent of loving God. There's the first commandment. There's the second commandment. So just to go to the point of worship, worship, the word literally means, I think it's basically to kiss towards, is what the word literally means. It's like we're praising God.
Yeah.
We're not praising, I'm thinking of like the Apostle John in Revelation when he bows the knee to the angel and the angel says, get up. It's like we're not worshiping one another.
Right.
We're worshiping God. We come together. Doesn't mean that we can't worship individually, right, in prayer and song different ways throughout the week. But when we come together on the first day of the week, like I said, and we're proclaiming the Lord's death, we're remembering the sacrifice, we're singing praises.
Well,
we're singing to one another, but we're also praising God.
You mentioned something as well about the worship and serving. Acts 6 kind of helps differentiate the two. Remember, they chose out the individuals.
Grecian widow account, is that what that is?
Yeah, they chose out the different individuals to be able to serve them, to make sure that they were getting the daily distribution, that love that we have for our neighbor. I think kind of, because what did Peter say? The reason behind it is we need to be able to give focus and attention to the Word of God.
Right.
To be able to preach, to word and prayer, to be able to give that time and attention to those things. And then we see there was a need to be able to differentiate and to be able to serve in both capacities.
Yeah.
But we see there's a difference. Yeah. And when it comes to our worship, we're to be able to worship God and be able to do it in the way that He has desired for us.
Yeah, and we're not saying none of these things stand on their own.
Right.
This is the work of the church, and we should be doing each one of these things. So even the royal law, you shall love the Lord your God. Oh, so that means if I love God but hate my brother, everything's good? It's like, no. You're a liar, according to 1 John. You got to do both.
Right.
The work of the church, we're not even necessarily saying one is more important than the other. Right. We're not trying to establish a pecking order.
Yeah.
This is what the work of the church is. So worship, you mentioned benevolence there in Acts 6. You want to go there next?
Yeah. Yeah, we go kind of moving on from worship and going into benevolence. Benevolence, I know sometimes we don't use that word.
It's a churchy word.
What we're talking about is the disposition or the ability to be
That's a churchy word too.
Yeah, I know. To do good.
There you go.
Goodwill, charity, as we look at this, or being able to be charitable in these things, an act of kindness.
Right.
As we kind of define some of the different things. We look there in Acts chapter 6, we could see these individuals that were chosen to serve. There was individuals that were needing assistance. They were there in Jerusalem. They had faced opposition, and there were widows that were being neglected of the daily distributions. Read in Acts 6, verse 1. Then we see the 12 be able to bring the disciples together. Let's pick out 7 good men, or they pick 7 good men. Let's pick out these different individuals of good reputation that they may be able to be over this business of being able to share and take part in that act of kindness. And as we look at this, when we talk about, we could talk about there's a difference, because we can be benevolent as individuals, and we can be able to help out many different individuals. People that are just on the street, or different, that we, out of our own pocket, or different things we have. When it comes to the church, there is a little bit of here you're helping fellow saints.
Right.
When we talk about the ability of what the church is involved with, they're helping fellow saints. It could be there locally. It could be someone that is not a local member there and needing some sort of assistance from time to time. And we see many different cases here in the New Testament of such things.
And from the church's beginning there in Acts chapter 2, as it speaks about that the people, they believed, they were together, they had all things in common, they sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all as anyone had need. Mm-hmm. And so you have this early collection happening.
Yeah, and then jump over to Acts 4:34 and 35.
And they laid them at the apostles' feet.
Exactly.
So you see this collection, you see this treasury, and then you see this treasury being put to use. And I would suggest from here, to think about, I don't know if this would be a necessary inference or not. Let me bounce something off of you. Do you think that Peter, James, and John, and Andrew, do you think they were still fishing at this time?
Like being an actual
that's like an odd question.
An actual fisherman?
Yeah, like as a business. I would be surprised, based somewhat on Acts chapter 6, because their argument in Acts 6 is basically we don't have the time for that. Yeah. We need to dedicate ourselves to ministry and to the word and prayer.
It'd be hard to be able to say that they were, because although they were here located in Jerusalem, they begin to kind of go spread out some.
Yeah.
Peter's traveling. I mean,
and I guess my point is, while we're looking at benevolence here in a little bit, we're going to talk about evangelism and think about how the apostles were taken care of. I don't think it's wrong to say they may have been supported out of that treasury.
Could have been. I think it would be a safe conclusion.
Yeah. I never thought about that. It's pretty clear from other passages that we'll read when we get to that point. But yeah, with benevolence, to your point about it, it's for the saints, and that's what the collection is called repeatedly. Actually, it's called for the saints. This is 1 Corinthians 16, verse 1. Now concerning the collection for the saints. Mm-hmm. We read actually in the passage last week talking about Christians in Acts chapter 11.
Yep.
When a prophet came from Jerusalem, Agabus stood up and showed through the Spirit there was going to be a great famine, and all of a sudden the gift was going to be sent. So you have this benevolence being sent. Well, the saints weren't the only people who were going to be affected by that famine. It was going to affect everybody, but that's not who the benevolence was being sent for.
Right.
And that it would be up to individuals to help their neighbors, but concerning the collection for the saints, that's what it's for. It's the collection for the saints. Now, I will say this, and I think this is one reason, as the church, how does Acts 2 put it, that they were growing in favor with God and man? Isn't that how it says it? Yeah. Praising God and having favor with all the people. I was thinking of another passage. But anyway, if you see, it's like, oh, the church takes care of its own, and you have the Grecian widows.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there were other widows in Jerusalem,
right,
who were not Christians. And you see, oh, the church takes care of its own. Well, okay, that would be very appealing. It's like, maybe I want to be a part of that.
Right.
And I'm not saying you're not doing it just for physical reasons, but yet benevolence is speaking about physical needs.
Yes.
And I would argue there's a spiritual connection to physical needs. That, for example, the Grecian widow account, a physical problem was leading to a spiritual problem. As in, there was, how does it phrase it there in Acts chapter 6? That there arose a complaint against the Hebrews by the Hellenists. That's a spiritual problem being created by a physical problem.
Yeah.
They were being neglected in the daily distribution, and it was leading to spiritual problems. Well, I think you can look at it the other way as well. You can see a physical blessing and make the connection to a spiritual blessing. And it's like, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, because people think that the church is a general benevolence, and that's another churchy word, meaning some people think the church should just be a social welfare program for everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, no. And the reason is, we've already talked about the collection for the saints, and it doesn't mean that we don't love others. It means if you want to take advantage of the Lord's blessings, get in the church.
Right. Right.
There's a difference. There's a distinction between inside and outside.
And as we talk about with some of the different things, you can, me as an individual, if there's
Right.
someone that needs some assistance, and I've been blessed with things,
Right.
I'm able to help out someone that
Sure.
may not be a member of the church, and being able to help them out from time to time with different things. Absolutely, that's where our individual blessings
Right.
of trying to help someone else out. That goes along with what's said over there in Romans 12, where we're heaping coals of fire on someone's head, where we're trying
to overcome evil with good.
We're trying to be able to do what we can to help one another out, and being able to help others be turning to God through our kindness, through our charity from time to time. But going there in Romans 12, I want to go back up to verse 10. It says, "Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor giving preference to one another, not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer." Notice what verse 13 says, "Distributing to the needs of the saints, giving hospitality." Now, I know that's talking per se about the mark of a Christian, but as well the church. The church focuses on being able to take care of the needs of the saints.
Right.
And there are different times where we may have different needs of benevolence, of charity, being able to help out in these different moments. And that is just one of the roles or works of the church.
I think sometimes we forget about it. I think sometimes it's not wrong to talk about evangelism and edification. We're going to talk about it here in a second.
Yeah.
But I think when churches forget about benevolence, they are making a mistake.
Right.
And churches need to be in tune with their members. And it's like if there's someone who's in need, and that's where the shepherds better know the flock.
Yeah.
And if someone's in need, that need needs to be met.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, you start having the Grecian widows complaining against the Hebrews, and you start getting ill will. And it's like, no, this is what the collection's for. And I think when people see that, it's like, oh, the church is firing on all cylinders. It's like it's not just theology; they're actually putting it into practice.
Yeah.
They're putting, frankly, this sounds kind of trite to put it this way, they're putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
And to say what Jesus said, wherever a man's treasure is, that's where his heart will be also.
We have opportunity to help someone if we can. There may be times where we might not be able to.
Right.
There may be means where we're not able to help out.
That's when you reach out to other congregations like Jerusalem and Agabus coming, and it's like, okay, say, hey, we have this need. We're not able to meet this need ourselves. Could y'all help us out?
Yeah.
And so I think brethren need to recognize that. They need to give as they purpose in their heart.
Right, which goes along with what 2 Corinthians 9 says. If we reap bountifully, if we sow bountifully, we're going to reap bountifully, and if we sow sparingly, we're going to reap sparingly.
Yeah.
So, there's a, as we see in general, the impact that it has on us being able to be benevolent with what we've been blessed with, but also being able to share in that from time to time.
Yeah. And concerning the individual giving, as it is individuals who give into this collection, Paul, in speaking about it there in 2 Corinthians 8, he says, "I speak not by commandment, but I am testing the sincerity of your love by the diligence of others." It's like it's a test. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what's in your heart?
Yep.
The proof is in the pudding.
That's right. Absolutely.
All right. So where you want to go to next?
And we'll just continue on, moving on next. Talk about evangelism.
Okay.
Third point. We talk about the role of the church, evangelism, and being, with both of us being able to say that we're evangelists, preachers, ministers, or however you want to describe it. So it should hit home for you and I with this, and being able to talk about how we're to preach the word. The church is a focus on preaching the word. It can't be said enough. Sometimes as we look in the church, we see we want to be able to focus on every other aspect, because when you get to the preaching of the word, sometimes people don't want to do that because it might upset people. It'll upset the apple cart from time to time, so to speak. And some people might not like what's being said. We have responsibility to preach the word at all times, in season, out of season. I kind of banked a little bit on 2 Timothy 4, verse 1 down to verse 5, where it says, I charge you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, and the Lord Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing. Preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. Convince, rebuke, exhort with all longsuffering and teaching. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires. Because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. They will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. But you be watchful in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist,
Right.
fulfill your ministry. Paul is giving instruction to Timothy, looking at that, again, preaching the word. I kind of banked on this for the next couple points, spend a little bit of time here in 2 Timothy, because it also talks about the edification. We'll talk about that next. But anyway, focusing on evangelism right now. Again, convince, rebuke, exhort with all patience and teaching.
Yeah, 1 Timothy 4, verse 12. Give attention to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. Meditate on these things. Give yourselves entirely to them, that your progress may be evident to all. One of those words there, which word is it? It's the word for public. It's public reading. I think it's give attention to reading, that it's the public reading of the word.
Yeah.
And it's like, evangelize. That, like I said, do the work of an evangelist. There's going to come a time where they're not going to endure sound doctrine. Yeah. But for now, it's like you're in Ephesus, and we got to get to Revelation 2 in the church in Ephesus, because there's, they did a lot of good things.
Right.
Now, the problem in Revelation 2 is they're leaving their first love. But what got them through those things, like people claiming to be apostles and finding them to be liars and doing all of those works that the Lord commends them for, Timothy is in Ephesus, and he's doing the work of an evangelist, and he's suffering for it, and it's not easy, but that's the work.
Yeah, absolutely. As we look at these things, you got 1 Timothy 4, 1 to verse 16 for us as well.
Verse 16, take heed to yourself and to the doctrine, continue in them, for in doing this you will save both yourself and those who hear you.
So not only do we see about giving the attention to everything, the public reading, preaching, being able to do this through convincing, rebuking, exhorting, and bringing ourselves entirely to doctrine, to reading, to exhortation. The benefits of it is not only those that will hear you. Again, there's that work. In order for people to hear, we got to be able to be involved with reading it, teaching it, preaching it, proclaiming it. People got to be able to listen, and we see the church is to take and be on the forefront of being able to work on evangelism, because it's through the word that we can be able to help not only ourselves be saved, but others being able to have salvation as well.
Yeah. I've heard people make the argument, they don't like the idea of churches supporting preachers. They don't like the idea of churches supporting preaching. And
that develops a whole different podcast lesson.
and because we're talking about the work of the church.
Yeah.
And the work of the church is evangelism. And even here in 1 Timothy 5, at verse 17, let the elders who rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in the word and doctrine. Well, that's talking about elders who are also preaching. laboring in word and doctrine. And then you have the quotation, for the scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain, and the laborer is worthy of his wages. And that concept appears elsewhere.
1 Corinthians
and
9,
it's
I
1
believe.
Corinthians chapter 9 where it speaks about it. And it's, as it speaks about these things, verse 11, if we have sown spiritual things for you, is it a great thing if we reap your material things? If others are partakers of this right over you, are we not even more? And just the concept of a laborer is worthy his wages. And as I said, I think you can show even Jesus and the apostles, when they're going around, it says that they were taken care of when the passage talks about the women who gave out of their sustenance. And there's a treasury box. Jesus could have gone around feeding the 5,000 every day of the week. He didn't need the treasury box. Then why have it? It's a test. It's like, are you invested in this?
Yeah.
Are you invested in benevolence? Are you invested in the spreading of word? Because the laborer is worthy his wages, and those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. Now, if they're not able to, or if they choose not to, Paul made tents. We understand that. But we also see the Philippians sent aid more than once to Paul.
Yeah.
And they were supporting evangelism. When they're in Antioch, like we spoke about last week, there at the tail end of our discussion, when the Holy Spirit says, separate to me Paul and Barnabas for the work that I have for them. What is that work? That's evangelism. They're going out spreading the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes churches, it's like, man, we see these four walls and we're like, oh, we want to stay inside and we don't want to go out.
Yeah.
And we have to, the word needs to spread. The power's not in us, the power's in the gospel. But the sower goes out to sow, and then you have the seed. So we sow, and the labor is worthy his wages. And like the apostles, frankly, churches need to, I have a tendency to put my foot in my mouth. That's okay. People get used to it after a while. When the apostles, come back to Acts chapter 6.
Okay.
I'm about to rant.
Uh-oh. You said you were doing so well today.
I know. They're in Acts chapter 6 when you have this physical need, and it was a physical need in Acts chapter 6. And in verse 2, the 12 summoned the multitude, and they said, it is not desirable that we should leave the word of God and serve tables. That concept. Is that in any way denigrating serving tables?
No.
Were they saying serving tables is not important? That's not what they're saying. But they're saying we have our work to do.
Jesus commissioned them to be able to be involved with this, and they were taking the lead role at the beginning stage of the church. So there was a need to be able to take care of these things, and so they wanted.
Right.
Listen, we're focusing on this. Let's make sure that these are not being neglected in any type of way.
Right.
Pick out people, and I believe didn't Stephen, who was one of the people selected, didn't he preach there in Acts chapter 7?
Yeah. Not very long.
Not very.
But
he preached a lesson, at least we know.
Yeah, and it was a good one.
But he was involved as well. It was not any way of trying to lower the work of serving tables.
Right.
It's like there in Ephesians 4 as well. You know, there were some selected to be preachers, some selected to be elders, some were selected to be apostles at that time. It wasn't trying to lower anybody else's work in any type of way. They were all needed. But you look down to verse 16. It's for the body. It's for to be able to to cause growth and stir up that love and growth in the church.
And my rant is, I understand Paul made tents.
Yeah.
Now, Paul also talks about why he did that at the end of 2 Corinthians, how he caught them by cunning, because he wasn't going to take a dime from them, even though he says he had the right to, but he wasn't going to take a dime from them because he didn't want to give them any ammunition to say, oh, well, he's just a mercenary. And by doing that, he caught them with cunning. He was being supported by someone else, the Philippians, and he was making tents. That was his choice. But I want to make this point just because I think it's important. whatever time Paul spent making tents, that was time taken away from other work he could have been doing. He had to make tents. He had to do that. What? He chose to do that, I should say. But when he talks to Timothy and he says a laborer is worthy his wages, and the church in Ephesus needed to take care of Timothy, and the church in Philippi was helping to take care of Paul, and those ladies were taking care of Jesus and the apostles, and you see that pattern, and I think churches need to take care of their preacher. Is what I'm saying, because you could say, oh, well, he needs to go get a side job. You work at the schools, right, Daniel?
Yep.
So this is about to get real personal. Sorry. Apologies in advance. What do you do at school? You work, you're a substitute for the janitor, janitorial work, right?
Do maintenance work, janitorial work.
How we doing on time? We're going a little long with this one. Sorry for the rant. How tactless do you want me to be, Daniel? There's a mess in the bathroom.
Okay.
So you have to go clean that mess up. Are you thinking about Sunday's sermon while you go clean that mess up?
Not all the time. To be honest, not all the time, but no.
You're choosing to do that, and that's your choice.
Yeah.
Now, my point is, it takes you away from the ministry of the word and prayer. That's my only point.
Yeah.
Now that's a choice, and that's your choice to make. But I think churches need to realize that if the church goes into it with the attitude of, oh, well, they can go get a side job and they can support themselves that way, and it's like, okay, yeah, we can, but that's going to be a distraction.
Yeah.
Do you really want your preacher distracted? Well, I think churches need to think about that. And a laborer is worthy his wages. And where's the verse? Those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. Oh, that's probably in one of the passages I just looked at. Let's see if you can pull it up. That is...
Yeah,
that's 1 Corinthians 9.
14. We were just there.
Yep. Even so, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. And so when we talk about the work of the church, benevolence, evangelism, you ready for edification now that I just bogarted your whole segment.
It's all right. It's all right. Yeah, we can talk about edification. Again, another one of those church words. Build up.
Yeah.
Instruction.
Right.
Improvement.
Yep. Just preach from 1 Corinthians 14 Sunday. Let all things be done for edification.
Being able to improve in faith, holiness, morals, knowledge. I mean, we start being able to encompass all those different qualities for us, and the church taking that time to build each other up, to continue to work on these things. And it's not just a matter of just, Sunday morning. We take time to build each other up Sunday evening. We take time to build each other up throughout the week. But when we come together, we take time throughout, Wednesday. There's some people that are just so beat down from all the things they have to deal with in the world that coming back on a Wednesday kind of helps edify, helps build them back up to finish off the week, to start a new week again. There's that time that we take. And I think when we look at this part of edification, that fellowship, that means, that assembling, not the physical assembly, but I'm talking about the action form. Assembling together helps in building each other up. Being able to be able to see you if we're worshiping together at church together, right. Being able to have those moments of building each other up, seeing my brothers and sisters, being able to learn together, being able to grow together, just being able to have this time. It helps encourage us and it helps build us up. Again, looking there in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2, preach a word in season, out of season, convince, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering. And notice what else he says, and teaching. So not only do we see the proclamation of the word through evangelism, but the continued growth together to build each other up and to encourage each other, to exhort each other. It's necessary. When we've seen the unfortunate events of neglect on that due to what COVID did over the course of 3.5 years, of our ability to be able to be edified with one another has lacked in many circumstances, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, when we come together, I mean, we're singing to one another.
Yeah.
We are teaching and admonishing one another.
Right.
We are praying together to the point where we can say the amen. Even the unbelievers should be able to say the amen. And we bring our offering together, and it's the collection for the saints. This is going for the work of the church, whatever work that may be. And we're studying together. I was reading, someone had shared some notes with me. Oh, is it in the Old Testament? Who gets up and, is it Ezra who gets up and reads the law? Yeah, Ezra gets up and reads the law. He stands up, they call for the book. They ask him to read the law. And he gets up, it's the word where the King James uses the word pulpit.
Yeah.
And he reads from the law, and everyone stands up. And then the Levites go around and they give the meaning. It's that account. But you see that engagement, that you have the preaching, but you also have the hearing and the amening. And it's like we are in this together. We're exhorting one another. We're encouraging one another. We're doing those things. And I'll say this, even the work that we're doing here on this podcast, it's like, if I just did it by myself, it would be, or if you just did it by yourself, it'd be quite a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
We feel like it's better to do things.
There's that interaction.
An interaction and a partner and a coworker.
And you and I having our different backgrounds of everything, kind of being able to talk about
mine's
different
better.
things. Okay.
Mine's better.
Yeah, well, that's your opinion, but we'll take the humble approach. Yes, John, it is better.
No, I'm more humble. But even when the Lord sent the disciples out, he sent them out 2 by 2.
Yeah.
Well, why does he send them out 2 by 2? And it's like, there's a reason.
Yeah.
And that you start having coworkers. Well, what is the church? What is the body? It's the members. We're edifying one another. We're being built up together. And it's like, next week, like I said, so next week we're going to talk about my role as a member.
Yeah, my role as a member of the church.
But when we think about the church together, and we're members individually, but we think about, okay, what's the work of the church? Benevolent, we come together to worship, and then we speak about benevolence, evangelism, edification. Like, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, we're trying to work together. Jesus gives a command. Not only did he say there in Matthew, for instance, Matthew 28:18 through 20, he talks about the proclamation of the word, but then after he talks about baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I've commanded. There's that building of each other up. As we continue on working together, being able to exhort one another, being able to build each other up through this teaching, through this instruction to help improve our life in service to God. That's what we're seeking to do. And, again, we're to be able to speak to one another, working together, being able to promote that things that are good for necessary edification there in Ephesians 4, that we may be able to impart grace to the hearers. There's so many different ways of looking at the church and being able to understand the need for edification. Each one of these that we've talked about so far continues on and continues to build each other up.
Yeah. I think you also, in your notes, along with all these other things, and the edification, the evangelism, fairly straightforward, you also wanted to talk about discipline.
Just briefly.
Yeah.
Just briefly, real quick. Discipline. The church works on discipline. Matthew 18:15 to verse 17, Jesus talks about how if a brother or sister sins against you, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to go and tell them your fault.
Go tell the elders.
Yeah. That's what we want to do. That's what we want someone
else. That was
else
sarcasm, by the way.
We want to bell the cat. We want someone else to bell the cat, so to speak.
I have no idea your Danielisms that you have. Bail the cat?
Bell
the cat?
Bell the cat.
I don't know. What does that mean?
You don't know what that means?
No.
Really?
No.
Okay, so you go, the mouse has to go and bell the cat. That way the cat knows, that way they know where the cat is at all times. The cat's always sitting there sneaking around, lurking around. So we got to get someone to bell the cat, to put that on the cat, to be able to let them know where it's at all times.
I see.
So we want someone else to be able to do our work and put themselves in danger, so to speak. But Jesus says not to be able to, go and tell them your faults. Go and help them out. Go and do these things. And if you're able to gain them back, you gain your brother or sister. If not, you gain more. You take more people to get every word established, to be able to understand and try to gain your brother or sister back. If that doesn't work, you tell it to who? Tell it to the church. And if the church refuses to hear, if they refuse to hear the church, treat them like a heathen or tax collector. This is not a fun work. Right. When it comes to this particular work of the church. And so because it's not enjoyable, sometimes people want to overlook it.
Right.
Now, this one we're going to go in a little bit more detail here in a couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah.
Of being able to talk about this. But I just
let me say this to that point, because it is both an individual matter, but it is also a church matter.
Yes.
That passage in Matthew 18, tell it to the church. If he doesn't hear them, let him be unto you. That you there is singular. Yep. So it brings it back to the individual's responsibility.
Right.
But that doesn't mean the church doesn't have a responsibility. It is a church matter and it is an individual matter.
Absolutely.
But here we're talking about the work of the church, and it is a church matter. There in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, when Paul says, he's dealing with that fella with the infidelity, and he says, let's see, where's the passage? Oh, let's see. Verse 4, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, when you are gathered together, along with my spirit, with the power of our Lord Jesus Christ, deliver such one to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that his spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord Jesus. Little leaven leavens the whole lump. When you are gathered together. It was a church matter, and the church needed to handle it.
Yeah. We see that there's responsibility on both the individual and the church taking a role, taking ownership in this situation. It's not to be overlooked. It's not just to be kind of just, that's the end of it.
Do you think discipline's almost a part of edification?
You could
and
say,
that sometimes in order to build,
there's a building up to breaking down to building up sort of thing.
It's like Jesus coming into the temple, and what does he do? He cleanses the temple.
Yeah.
And once he cleanses the temple, then others came to him in the temple, and he was teaching.
Yeah.
But he could not teach in the temple while all the shenanigans were going on.
Exactly. There was a need to be able to do some unfortunate things, unsavory things, and then be able to get back on track, get back on focus. I mean, there's
you got to do the excavation work.
Yeah.
And John the Baptist came calling the people to repentance. He was doing the heavy landscaping, bringing the mountains down and the valleys up.
Yeah.
And it's like that required rebuking people.
Right, exactly. And that's where we see there in 2 Timothy 4:2, again, the convince, rebuke.
Right.
And then he goes on to say exhort. So you go from rebuking back to exhorting to be able to build up.
Yep.
And be able to go from there, from that having to break down. And again, we'll talk more about that part particularly because there's a lot of questions that people will have about the discipline role of the church and our responsibility in that.
So what time is the Kenny Chesney concert on Sunday? Are y'all... That's what I feel like in the denominational world, that sometimes it's like you don't know if you're tuning in for some country singer concert.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not the work of the church.
No.
That we're coming together to worship and be edified, evangelism, benevolence, discipline.
Yep.
Because
not in any particular order, all of them
are
cornerstones and building points for the church. Each one of them are important.
This all goes together to how we are built up and how we serve.
Yes.
So thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate everyone tuning in, joining us for this study. We hope you're doing well. Daniel has one more plug.
October 8th. Meetings coming up. October 8th through the 11th. Our meeting starts this coming Sunday, October 8th. Brother Keith Welch from Barberton will be coming over speaking for us. Again, we'll be in our normal times on Sunday and then on Monday through Wednesday, 7:30 each night.
All right.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Appreciate everyone joining us. We thank you very much as we are all looking unto Jesus. We hope you tune in next week.
Thank you.